This past weekend, Sweet Spot 8 went down in Lawrence, Kansas, and I already made a video yesterday recapping the entire top 8. But Sweet Spot 8 was carnage, like I mentioned yesterday. And the one thing that we didn't go over was the insane amount of upsets, losers runs, and huge breakouts from different players here at Sweet Spot 8. Today, we'll be doing just that. And just a reminder before we begin that if you want to support me monetarily, you can do so by using links to my Patreon or channel memberships in the description down below. With that out of the way, how will I be formatting this video? Well, first, I'm going to go over the 3 biggest storylines from Sweet Spot 8. These happen to be the 3 players that are listed on the thumbnail of this very video: Shadzix, Neo, and Fidji. These 3 got multiple upsets that led to an insane run deep into bracket. Next, we'll be looking at the huge solitary upsets. Upsets that didn't really lead into anything but are still notable. And lastly, we'll be tying up those loose ends. Mostly this segment will be going over my experience at Sweet Spot 8, but we'll also include some other bits and bobs that didn't fit anywhere else. Without further ado, let's get started by taking a look at who I'd consider to be the 3 breakout stars from Sweet Spot 8: Fidji, Neo, and Shadzix. 2 of these players are from my home region of Kansas City, so let's talk about the one that isn't first: Fidji. Fidji is from Iowa and is a solo banjo and kazooie main. Right now, Fidji has been trying to make the case for being the best banjo main in America, if not in North America. And Sweet Spot 8 did nothing but exponentially increase the likelihood of that being true. Fidji came into Sweet Spot as the 25th seed and started off the weekend by winning the first 2 sets of pools flawlessly, getting a great win over Lucas Main Tiger Nope, winner of the last Kansas City Arcadian. So now, Fidji moved into their next set against Shu. Shu, the ZSS, was the 8th seed of the entire event, and she was in the process of sweeping her way into top 32 as expected. But Fidji ended up going up 2-0 on Shu. Now, Sweet Spot was all BO5, so this wasn't the end of the set. Instead, Shu ended up winning the next 2 games in a row on the precipice of a reverse 3-0. It went last stock, last hit, when suddenly, Fidji reversaled Shu and ended up preventing the reverse 3-0, defeating the 8th seed in an upset factor 4 victory. We'll mention Shu later on in the video because her losers run was very noteworthy. But for Fidji, they'd now made top 32 through winner's side and had to go up against Deathspade, who, fun fact, is actually a really big fan of Fidji. But that didn't stop Deathspade from 3-0ing Fidji, sending the banjo down into losers bracket. Once here, Fidji managed to clutch out a Game 5 set against Caden, one of the best Ridleys in the United States, in a set that was unfortunately off-stream. Fidji's next set would also go to a Game 5, and it was versus Colorado pit main Mr. Ping. But if you've seen yesterday's video, you know how this set ends. Mr. Ping got revenge for their fellow Colorado player and doubles teammate Shu, and ended up defeating Fidji in a Game 5 set, eliminating Fidji at 13th place as the 25th seed after one of the best upsets of the entire tournament. Kansas City as a whole had a really good weekend, and 2 of my region's players who are not even on the PR are responsible for 2 of the largest upsets. I mean, to be fair, they both probably could be on the PR if they actually attended tournaments, but they don't, so they're not. And yeah, more KC propaganda, but these 2 went on such amazing runs after basically not going to any locals for like months. That's how good my home scene is, and I couldn't be more proud of them. Neo, the first of these 2 unranked players, came into Sweet Spot 8 as the 42nd seed. And while Neo plays both Ike and Roy, the spotlight was definitely on Neo's Ike. Neo started off the weekend by winning the first set of pools against Payday in a quick 3-0. After this, Neo had to go up against Quaz, one of the best Little Mac mains in the world, and the Mac who defeated Peanut in the Mac Ditto at the Salt Box. Quaz, as the 23rd seed, was the clear favorite to win this set, but that wasn't to be. Instead, Neo defeated Quaz in a close Game 5 set, using a combination of both Roy and Ike, though it wasn't on stream. This meant that Neo went into the final pool set against Vapor, who was the 10th seed and an incredibly talented Mr. Game & Watch main. But here's the thing, Neo has lots of practice against Ploopy, the Game & Watch main who was the 11th seed and who made top 8 at Sweet Spot. Also, Neo's playing Ike. And while that matchup isn't seen as that bad these days, it's still a really big sword, and Neo put it to good use. Neo defeated Vapor in a Game 5 set, good for an upset factor of 4. And these 2 incredible upsets against both Quaz and Vapor allowed Neo to make it into top 32 from winner's side. Unfortunately, once here, Neo lost to Shadzix 3-0 and then immediately lost to Tim Prater 3-1 in loser's bracket, for a final placement of 17th as the 42nd seed. But for an unranked player, Neo's wins were phenomenal, and in a lot of ways, Neo is helping put Ike back on the map, a character that so desperately needs a renaissance in 2024. Also, Neo's win over Quaz would have unintended consequences that we'll touch on later. Consequences that would cause one of the top seeds of the tournament to meet a terrible fate. The last player that we're covering in this segment is Shadzix. Shadzix and Neo share a lot in common. They're both unranked Kansas City players who would probably be ranked if they actually went to locals. Which is not a shadow diss and instead just a plea to both of them to just please start coming back to locals again. And they're both co-mains, with Neo having played Ike and Roy and with Shadzix playing Pokemon Trainer and Byleth. And they're both responsible for massive upsets. Shadzix came into Sweet Spot 8 as the 39th seed and started off the weekend by winning their first set 3-0 as expected. What wasn't expected was the second set against Skew, another Banjo main. Shadzix would end up defeating Skew 3-0, and as Skew was the 26th seed, it was a minor upset for Shadzix. But it wouldn't compare to the next set. Shadzix had to go up against Rocky, the Kansas City Pac-Man main who was the 7th seed of the entire event. On top of this, Shadzix had a horrendous set count against Rocky going into Sweet Spot, being 0-13 lifetime with Rocky. It would be nothing short of a miracle for Shadzix to win this set. And yet, against quite literally all odds, Shadzix defeated Rocky for the first time ever here at Sweet Spot 8. Good for an upset factor of 5, the largest upset of the entire tournament. This upset even escaped the normal Twitter circles, and many people online voiced that if they had been up 13-0 on someone lifetime, it'd be their worst nightmare for them to have their first loss at a big tournament like this. But unfortunately for Rocky, the nightmares were not over. But back to Shadzix, Top 32 started with a win over Neo 3-0, putting Shadzix in winners quarterfinals as, again, the 39th seed. But unfortunately, Top 8 wasn't in the cards for Shadzix, first losing 3-1 to Atreus, who used a Pocket Young Link for some reason? I guess because it's supposed to be PT's worst matchup or something? I don't know. But after dropping into losers, Shadzix would lose to Mr. Ping 3-0 for a final placement of 9th as the 39th seed after making the biggest upset of the tournament. And now it's time to look at the really huge upsets that weren't connected to a huge bracket run. And where else to start but with Rocky Balboa? You see, Rocky had just suffered through being the victim of the tournament's biggest upset. Nothing could be worse than that, right? Well, wrong. Because do you remember how Neo defeated Quaz early on in bracket, sending the Little Mac main down into losers early? Well, now the two of them were on a crash course collision. The 23rd seed in Quaz and the 7th seed in Rocky fought to see who would make top 32 through losers and who would place 33rd. And while it wasn't put on stream, thankfully we have a recording of the end of the set. And yeah, Quaz defeated Rocky 3-1. The same score that Rocky lost to Shadzix with, being double upset and eliminated at 33rd as the 7th seed. But hey, it's not all bad. Since Rocky didn't make top 32, he was able to enter Ultimate Ladder the next day. And as you'd expect of a top 8 seed entering what was basically Redemption bracket, Rocky swept it to first place without dropping a single set the entire time. This victory meant that Rocky won a pair of HyperX headphones. And given the fact that those retail on Amazon for around $80, this means that if Rocky resold these headphones, he'd probably make a little bit more money than some of the top 8 finishers did from the split on that ultimate prize spot. So, you know, silver linings and all of that. Aaron, the North Dakota Mii Swordfighter main, had a pretty rough time in bracket. They entered Sweet Spot as the 19th seed, but lost early on in pools to Arare, a South Dakota Pikachu main, in a Game 5 set for an upset factor 2. And after dropping into losers, she got upset again, this time by another unranked Kansas City player. This time it was Lucario main Zamatron, who defeated Aaron in a close Game 5 set, good for an upset factor of 3, which ended up eliminating Aaron at 49th as the 19th seed. But that about wraps it up in terms of massive upsets. In fact, that upset was the last one that we're covering today with anything bigger than an upset factor of 1. So I'm basically just going to cover what I consider to be the most notable wins before we move on to the loose ends. Avril is a Kansas City Aegis main who was also unranked, but probably would be ranked if they actually attended stuff. And at Sweet Spot 8, Avril got 2 upset wins over both Onua and Trajan 6, both in Game 5 sets. Kansas City Yoshi main Justin23 unfortunately got double upset, first losing to Iowa Fox main P-Easy in winners, and then after a small losers run, lost to Tim Prater in a 3-1 set, to place 13th as the 12th seed. Which doesn't seem like an underperformance, but losing to 2 players with lower seeds meant that it was still technically upsets. While I went over this briefly yesterday, in order to make top 8, Kansas City Game & Watch main Ploopy got an insane win over Atomic, the invading Rob main from Texas. It was a 3-1, and there are two things worth noting here. One is that in order to win that game 4, Ploopy made a massive comeback. The second is that Ploopy popped off so hard that he nearly knocked the chair off of the stage. And once again, while I went over this run in depth during yesterday's video, I still think Mr. Ping's run deserves special recognition. As the 22nd seed, Mr. Ping defeated basically a lot of the people who we spent this entire video talking about. After losing to Ploopy 3-0 to barely not make it out of pools, Mr. Ping entered top 32 from loser's side. Once here, Mr. Ping went on an insane losers run, defeating South Kansas Palutena main and TO Justice 3-0, as well as defeating Zen, a Nebraska Pikachu main 3-1. After this, Mr. Ping defeated two of the players who made some of the biggest upsets at Sweet Spot, first defeating Fidji in a Game 5 set, as well as defeating Shadzix 3-0 to make top 8. But if you want to see how Mr. Ping did in top 8, you'll have to go see yesterday's video. Oh, and by the way, Spice had a really close Game 5 set with Diddy Kong main Blue Jay that Spice ended up clutching out in a Game 5 comeback victory. It didn't really fit anywhere else in the video, but I knew people wanted me to mention it or else they'd yell at me. So here it is, I'm talking about it, there you go. Now let's talk about Shu. You might remember when I talked about Shu losing to Fidji early on in bracket. Well, Shu actually proceeded to go on perhaps the best losers run of the entire tournament, as well as winning doubles with Mr. Ping. If you recall, Shu's loss to Fidji was almost a reverse 3-0 on her part, but Fidji prevented the reverse 3-0 from coming true, which sent Shu down into losers early. And after making top 32 through losers, Shu had to fight Skew, another Banjo man. And get this, Shu actually lost game 1 with Zero Suit Samus. If Shu had lost to double Banjo to place like 65th, I would have shed many tears. But fortunately, Shu had been practicing quite a few secondaries, and went Mario for the rest of the set, clutching it out against Skew in a 3-1 victory. After this, Shu went on to defeat GamerDog, ranked #1 in South Kansas, in a 3-1 set victory, before moving on and getting another phenomenal win against Toffee, a member of the Kansas City PR, in a 3-1. Shu now moved into the loser's side top 8 qualifier, to go up against Nico. Nico was the 3rd seed of the entire event, and played Shulk. For Shu, the 8th seed, to beat Nico would have been an upset even if it had happened within the top 8, but now it had to happen outside of it. And even worse, Shulk is considered to be one of, if not definitively, Zero Suit Samus' worst matchup in the entire game. It seemed like for Shu to win, she'd need a miracle. But despite all odds, Shu won the first 2 games. And on game 3, she had Nico in an insane percent deficit. It would have been crazy for Nico to win this game, but win it Nico did, at nearly 200%. And then Nico won game 4, bringing us to a decisive game 5. And sadly enough, Shu lost game 5 to Nico, being eliminated at 9th place as the 8th seed after almost making an insane upset to make top 8. This means that for Shu's 2 losses, she almost reverse 3-0'd and didn't, and then got reverse 3-0'd after Nico won game 3 while under a huge percent deficit. Tragically, there may also have been some external factors affecting Shu's play, as apparently someone commented on Shu's appearance in a way that really negatively affected her, right before this set. And you guys know that aside from my propaganda towards Kansas City, I don't really have biases. But wow, everything about these circumstances just bums me out a lot. But it was still the best losers run of the tournament, and a strong showing given the circumstances. And lastly, there's one more player that I want to mention who went on a small but notable run in both bracket and commentary. That player is me. Like I mentioned in yesterday's video, I was at Sweet Spot 8 myself and did commentary and did really well in singles bracket. But with that said, this was my journey at Sweet Spot 8. And if you didn't know, I do compete and consistently go to locals. I'm basically middle of the road in terms of my region, average as seen on my PG stats page, which by the way is currently filtered by offline results only. Oh, and by the way, if this video is how you're finding out that I'm a Min main, I'm sorry. Either way, I came into Sweet Spot 8 as the 129th seed out of 204 entrants, seeded to go 0-2. But if I could just make one upset over my round 1, I would go up against the first seed, Apollo Kage. My first opponent was a St. Louis Robin man whose tag was Merrick. And even though I was seeded to lose here, I ended up winning fairly convincingly, winning the set 3-0. To be fair, it is a really bad matchup for Robin. Needless to say though, I don't believe my opponent was very stoked about this loss. Either way, I next went up against Apollo Kage, and as you may expect, I got completely whooped. I took 2 stocks throughout 3 games, and while I would have loved to do better, I know that there are a lot of people at this tournament and at home watching who would have done a lot worse. So it's really hard to be upset about it or anything. All I had really wanted in singles was to upset my round 1 and get the chance to fight AK. And once I had, I didn't really care how I did in losers. But after dropping into losers, I defeated Jiro, a Terry main 3-1. And I have to give a shout out to my chat and my live streams. There are a lot of Terry mains in my chat that I fight during my streams on the weekend. And if it weren't for all of them, I basically wouldn't have had any Terry matchup experience. So you know what? Thanks for that, guys. After this, I got another win over Mighty Lion, a Kansas City Zelda main. In months past, I was never able to beat Mighty Lion, but after grinding that matchup and getting in lots of good practice, I've been on a winning streak lately. And this set was no different, as I won 3-0. But my next opponent was Poppin, a Kansas City Little Mac and Dr. Mario main. Poppin has been one of my most consistent practice partners since I started competing again after COVID lockdowns were lifted. And even with a good matchup, Poppin just knows my habits and how to beat me better than maybe anyone else alive. So I ended up losing the set 3-0. And so I ended my run at Sweet Spot 8 at 65th as the 129th seed. I definitely think I could have gone a little bit further with a little bit luckier of a bracket, but when my losses are the highest ranked player in the entire Midwest and my long-term practice partner, how am I going to be upset about those losses? Getting the chance to fight AK was all I was really hoping for, and I ended up going positive. So you know what? It was a good tournament for Rister My Stocks. That being said, once again, I do commentary at large events, and I might add, I'm pretty dang proud because I have confidence that I'm good at what I do. If you're a large tournament in the Midwest and you want to invite one of Smash Ultimate's largest and fastest growing content creators out to your event to commentate, you can contact my business email as well as DMing me on either Twitter or Discord. I also have my commentary reel on this channel, which again might get updated. Again, if you're a TO and you want your tournament covered by my channel and exposed to my rapidly growing audience, inviting me out to do comms is a pretty surefire way to ensure that I'll make a video covering your tournament. And with that said, that's going to be it for today's video. Before I go, shout out to my patrons at Laster, Falsco33, Logan S, Persipalm Wawa, Mr. Sister, Happy Feet, Oceanman, and my teacher patrons, Delta and Time and Bliss. Additionally, shout out my YouTube members, Teacher Junior, Defective Diarrhea, Fan Up, Boston R, Wisconsin Speed, Kirby Fan, Nexus, Local Circle, my YouTube members, Mike G, Wu-Tang River, and Stormtrooper. Lastly, extra special thanks to my tier 3 patrons, Misty Bot, who says, in my opinion, Megunner is high tier, and Fat Blizzard, who says Zomba is the best player on the planet. If you want to support me using any of these methods, links are in the description down below. Also, I want to give one last sincere thanks to Let Me Fly for their continued support of my channel. Link to their Twitter page in the description down below. Don't miss tomorrow's upload, but until then, I've been Mr. Mice, and thank you all so very much for watching.
Bring it up, backside to everything, but we gonna bring it up. Even if a dime or words to live, bring it up until my last breath, never ever gonna give it up.